Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. My name is Bree Noble, and I'm excited to be here with Alice Sandahl. We're going to be talking about some really interesting things about songwriting and making sure that we actually finish what we start, getting the ideas out of our head and onto the paper and onto the recording. As well as like lots of other things we're going to talk about around artistry and how to develop ourselves as an artist. But before we get into that, I would love to hear your background, Alice. Like, I know you were in a band for quite a long time. So I'd love to know kind of how you got into music, how you got involved in that band, and how that led you to what you're doing now.
Totally. Yeah, I'd love to share that. And I just want to start by thanking you so much, Bree, for having me. I love these kinds of conversations and the work that you're doing. And I feel like there's this Venn diagram between the kind of, our values and what we're doing for other artists. So I'm just happy to be here. So, but I can get into my background. Well, I mean, like many musicians, I've started very young, but when I was in my 20s, I moved to Seattle, and a lot of people know Seattle as this, the town of Sub Pop, Nirvana, a lot of indie rock and roll coming out of there. And I moved there and played in many bands, as many of those artists were, like all these bands overlapping. I did that for years, and it was, you know, I used to joke because I was teaching actually in a elementary school. I was teaching music and then playing music in the evening. I used to joke that I was like a clown by day and like a a nightclub artist by night. But so I was playing in many bands, and somewhere along the way, towards I think it was maybe I'd been in Seattle about 7 years at that point. I I connected with the women of a band called La Luz, and I'm a founding member of that band. And that was kind of the perfect fusion of four people coming together that felt really driven by this project, and we were all in. So the momentum of that project was, I mean, it was just an uphill incline, and it was fun. We had a great time. I'm still involved with that band. I am not a full-time member, but I am touring with them this fall. So that I would say is like such a huge part of my journey as an artist. I spent over a decade with that band, wrote many records and recorded with them. But somewhere along the way too, in there, I really felt this calling and longing to put out my own work. And despite the experience, was finding I wasn't actually taking much action on that, and it felt like a kind of a pain point of like, there's something in me that wants to also, in addition to this collaboration, put out my own work. And when the pandemic happened, actually, so I moved with that band, Seattle, that band that I started in Seattle. We all moved to Los Angeles. So we continued together and we were making music. And fast forward to the pandemic, and in the pandemic era, that was when, I think for a lot of us, it was a very reflective time, and I started to look more closely at like, why am I not taking action here? What stopping me, and what are the things that when I am able to push forward, like what is supporting me? So I just got a little more curious about my own inaction, and from that came, well, two things. I've recorded and released my first solo record, and then I knew other people must be kind of experiencing the same feeling. So I developed this method, the courses that I create now. Like, so from that also came the courses that I offer and the coaching that I offer now.
Mm. I mean, I can really identify with that not moving forward, even though you like want it so much, right? And trying to figure out what
Yeah.
that is that's stopping you. I know in my case, and this maybe not in your case, but in my case, it was that I didn't really believe that I could do it on my own. I always thought
Mhm.
I needed a band. I didn't know enough. I didn't have enough to offer on my own. And also, I think it was that like I didn't think wrote the kind of songs I wanted to write, and I wasn't accepting the fact that this is how I write And it's
Yeah.
just what comes out. And like, I need to embrace that instead of being like, but I wish I wrote like Sarah McLachlan, you know?
Yeah, totally. And I think like a lot of it is that self-acceptance, being like, well, what do I, how does my work come out? But then also like not judging the inaction too. Like not
Mm.
getting like so hard on the fact that you're not taking action. At least that's what definitely helped me. Like once I could be a little kinder about that and just get more, really just be curious about it instead of beating
Mm.
myself up for not doing it.
Yeah, how do you balance that? Because, there can be, we can use that as an excuse too. Well,
Yeah, that's so true.
right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I got to
Mm-hmm.
figure out why I'm not doing these things. And so you
Yeah.
all this time figuring it out, quote, and then a year later, you still haven't done anything.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true. We can. And I think it is like really then balancing the like self-curiosity is so, I think, healthy and powerful, but like how are you balancing that with action? And action doesn't mean grand gestures, I don't think. Like action can be small things like sitting down at your instrument and taking some time to just get playful.
Mm.
Or action could be looking into where you might want to record. Like there can be smaller steps that aren't the huge steps towards the thing.
Right. Right. And so how do you determine, let's just say you're in the middle of writing a song and you get stuck. How do you determine whether that's writer's block or whether it's fear or, what is that thing that's stopping you?
Yeah, I love that question. And I just like did a post about this because I had a new client, he came to me and he was like, I feel like I'm struggling with writer's block, which I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling. That feeling is so real of being like, I don't know why I can't move past or ideas aren't coming. But there usually is something underneath that, right? So with him, we were just I just feel like a lot of my job is to ask the right questions and get a little like help my clients get curious about like so for him it was distraction. He felt
Mm.
like it wasn't actually writer's block, it was distraction. And often I think it's overthinking. I think overthinking can kind of be the writer's block. So, I mean, the question still isn't how do you, okay, I've identified that, but how do I still move forward? And with with this client in particular, like he identified it was actually distraction. So we just found small ways that week because we're meeting weekly and was like, how can we eliminate distraction even for 10 minutes? Like,
Mm.
let's start really small. So I do think the starting point is seeing what really is underneath the writer's block, because I think that term can also become an excuse in a way, and then can become an identity, which
Mm.
is not, rather we want to identify as prolific, generating creatives rather than a blocked artist.
Right. For sure. And then I think on the other side of that, I've worked with some people where like there's got to be a distinction of when something is done because they just keep
Yeah.
tinkering. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And I get that question a lot from students, like how do I know when I'm done? And it's such like a deeply personal question,
Hmm.
but I'm not sure if you've ever read Rick Rubin's book. I'm actually blanking on
I
the title
haven't
right
read his
now.
book. I love Rick Rubin. I have not read his book.
Yeah, I highly recommend that. I'm blanking on the title. It's of course, I've got it on my other bookshelf, but it's very, you'll see it everywhere. It's like the round circle with the dot. And it's one of those, like, you don't have to read it from start to finish. You can just open it up and like pick a page to
Mm.
read. But I love how he says that when we're deliberating on a piece, it's not that different from reworking a journal entry over and over and over.
Hmm.
And that we wouldn't do that with a journal entry. We wouldn't sit there and rewrite it and rewrite it. We would just kind of allow it out and then let it be or let it maybe evolve. And he also does talk about finishing and kind of just developing your own understanding of when you're finished because it is such a personal decision, but knowing that sometimes when you're avoiding finishing, you're avoiding something else. You're avoiding the vulnerability right
Right.
here.
The judgment. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So, like anything, I think even finishing, we get so attached to our pieces, I think. And we think of them as like every one of them is this like huge representation of ourselves, but sometimes they're just practice. And
Mm.
so finishing can be a practice, I think.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of the journal entry because you aren't gonna sit there and change it and change it and change it. On the other hand, journal entries can be very personal, and if we make our songs so personal to us, they might not be universal enough. So I think there does have to be, some kind of balancing there of like, well, let me look at this from the perspective of someone who's not me, you
Yeah,
know?
totally. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think making that shift can be helpful in writing in a different way too. Like
Hmm.
writing from a new perspective, writing a little outside of yourself, maybe.
Yep. So when you were in the band and like what made you, I know you said COVID, it caused us to get inquisitive, have time to really think through and that kind of thing. But like what made you realize like I have something different to say that only I can say as a solo artist? And what made you decide to actually pursue that?
Oh man, that's such a good question. Um, and I don't know if I've ever really asked myself that. I think it was a feeling. You know, there was this feeling of I felt like my the strengths that I brought to that band were showing up. I was using those, but I'm a trained vocalist. I wanted to experience more of that expression with my voice. I do sing in that band, but I could just it really was so much more like a feeling, like a sense that there was other stuff I wanted to do with my talents, like singing more, developing more of my piano skills, and maybe trying out other things that were hard, like
Hmm.
outside of the wheelhouse of what I was using in that band. So I think it was almost like that natural inclination towards growth, like wanting to just like reach and stretch a bit more
Hmm.
and not really having a super clear idea of like what would my music sound like, but knowing there was something I wanted to play with.
Interesting. A lot of artists that I work with, they really identify with the term like legacy.
Oh,
Something that
yeah.
you want to leave your mark on the world. Did you feel like that
Yeah.
was part of it?
Yeah, I would say that. And I don't know if I could have identified and named it that at the time, but I think now I would say that. Like I can kind of feel that desire to put that mark, which also shows up in the work I do as like an educator as well, that I want to like support others and leave a mark of my philosophies.
Yeah, me too, for sure, as an educator.
Yeah.
So when you're working with artists, like, are there some really fundamental questions that you work with them right up front to like help them figure out what they really want to do? Because I know a lot of us, I know for me, like when I was younger, I'm just like, I just want to do music. I don't care what it is, but I
Yeah.
did care, at that point, I was just like, I really wanted to do it so much. I felt like I was just going to do whatever because I didn't care. I just wanted to do music. But like, we want to pursue a specific path that makes sense for us. So, how do we figure out what that is?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'm just curious, like you knew you wanted to be performing and being a musician. Were you like, I want this as my job?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did. I did.
Yeah.
I was working at the opera as a director of finance. And, while it was cool because I got to be around the arts, I wanted that as my job. I wanted to
Yeah.
be surrounded by music all the time because that's
Hmm.
what I loved. And
Yeah.
there's that little bit of like, I want to be fame. I want people to know who I am. I want people to recognize my accomplishments, that kind of thing, which I grew out of after I had kids. But I think that you have that in the beginning. But for me, it was just like, oh my gosh, I love music so much. I just want to do it all the time.
Yeah, right. I know I can relate to that too. I felt that way and feel that way. Um, so it kind of sounds like this desire to be seen. I think a lot of artists have that and people. Um, but to go back to your question, I I really fundamentally start with this question of what is your why, and getting supporting artists to get clear on what their why is, because sometimes I think we're chasing someone else's why.
Mm.
And if we can know, and it doesn't mean we might not be at all impenetrable, like something can't hurt us, but I think if we're grounded in our why, like our why do you want to make music? Why is it important to you to perform? Why do you want to release your music? If you can be so clear, it can ground you. And then you won't necessarily feel as shaken if you don't show up with your best performance or if the audience isn't packed, because you know that you're there clear on your why.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's like there's a longer game,
Yeah.
right? So like you said, when you have something that doesn't go well,
Yeah.
which we all do, we all have a very twisty paths, right?
Hmm.
They're not straight. They're not all a perfectly straight uphill graph,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so, having that grounding, like you said, is going to make it so much easier when things go wrong.
Yeah. It really is. And I think and that has worked for me too, which is part of why I start there. I've had other coaches do the same thing for me, and I can feel it myself that, like you said, that windy path. Well, I have my why. That's my North Star. So whatever direction it's taking me, I can still like keep that, and it can ground me, and I can love what I do despite whatever the things I can't control.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's really necessary. So I know you kind of have this framework that you use with artists and you have like 3 steps to help them really figure out what is the right path for them. I'd love for you to kind of outline those.
Yeah, I'd love to. So the first step, if we were to break it down into three steps, is what we just talked about, is really identifying your whys. Take some time to journal. That's usually how it's come to, how that's become clear for me, like what my why is. So I'll recommend that to clients, and not just recommend it, I ask them to do it. And then getting clear on your why. And then from there, the second step would be getting clear on where you want to put your focus. And that doesn't mean for the rest of your career. It could just mean your focus for that month, or your focus for, I like to work in 90-day cycles.
Me too. It's like just long enough that it feels like you could really accomplish something, but short enough that like if something changes, you can recorrect.
Yes, totally. It's like this manageable time frame, and it feels like the sweet spot, which is why I like
Exactly.
to do like coaching containers in that period too. But so the when you can get clear on where to put your focus, like just for that 90 days or that 30 days or whatever, then you can identify, and I also want to just add that where to put your focus, I ask people to like put it where you're the most excited. So
Mm.
if the thing in that period of time is you're the most excited about recording, then put your focus there. If you're most excited about, I don't know, your branding or your songwriting, like wherever you're feeling like this is exciting me.
Or booking live performances. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so then when you know where to put your focus, then the third step is like identifying the actions that kind of move you towards that focus, toward that focal point. And as I said earlier, those can be small actions. They don't have to be large. think even small actions like move us in that direction.
Oh, for sure. In fact, I think it makes it easier because it's
Yeah.
much more doable if we break it down into really small. I mean, this is very similar to my 90-day goal setting that I have artists go through because it does even 90 days feels overwhelming when you're just looking at it in the big picture.
Yeah.
But if,
Hmm.
if one of your action steps is choose a distributor for my music, or let's just say, right? Like that's doable. I can do that in 30 to 60 minutes.
Yeah, right. And that's like, that's moving you in that direction, right? And then you can kind of just be like, I did that step. You can take a break. You don't have to
Yep.
like keep this like,
And
I
that
don't know.
feeling of accomplishment then creates the momentum. I mean, it's a cycle of awesomeness when it builds upon each other.
Yeah. I like that term, cycle of awesomeness.
That's my thing. I always say I'm such an 80s person because I love saying the cycle of awesomeness about so many things
I
in
love that.
when it like builds, like the whole booking cycle of awesomeness when you start getting, repeat bookings and things like that.
Yeah.
It becomes like you can think of it as a flywheel or a snowball or whatever, but I like the cycle of awesomeness.
Yeah. Can I borrow
Sure.
that? Yeah, the cycle of awesomeness. It's so true too, because like to your point of you take that small step and then you feel so good, and then you believe you're like, I'm the kind of person that takes actions
That's
towards
right.
my dreams.
That's right.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious if you talk about this with your clients. One thing that I talk to them about when they're doing their goals and all that, is that there are also things that you need to make sure you are not doing during your goal period because there's so many other things that can distract us from the goal that we're focused on that are good things, that are things we might eventually want to do, or they can be distracting things. We see other artists doing this. Oh my gosh, we should be doing this. Oh my, it's the whole like
Yeah.
shiny object syndrome and all that. So like I actually encourage artists to keep a not doing list.
I love that. That's a good idea. I might borrow that for myself because, yeah, even when you're like, I know what I'm focusing on, the shiny object syndrome, it's exciting to do other stuff, and
It
you're a creative
is.
person, so you want to like do everything.
And somehow we can convince, well, this is somehow related to the goal. No, let's be
Yeah.
honest. It's not.
Yeah. That's a good idea. I love that.
Well, another thing that I think holds artists back, and I know you talk about this because you've been in a band for so long and you've been in, a couple different locations and all that, is building a network, right?
Hmm.
Art like that can really make or break you, knowing other people in the industry, knowing other musicians that you can collaborate with and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of us have a network. We just aren't utilizing it for whatever reason. I know for me when I started, because I had moved to a new place and I had to start from scratch, but like my network was the people at my church because I was a worship director.
Hmm.
And like I utilized that network. I didn't know if it could help me in music, but I'm like, this is the network I have, right?
Yeah.
So what do you
Yeah.
think keeps people from even utilizing the network they have, let alone the network they can still build?
Well, I think sometimes it's not seeing that you have a network already.
Hmm.
I think it's a little bit of that. But I mean, if you live in a city, which maybe you don't, but like if you live in a city, there are probably open mics all over. So you can start to at least create, tap into that web
Mm.
that exists. But like you said, maybe that wouldn't be as obvious to someone like, oh, I have a network right here. So kind of looking a little bit, and maybe it's just one friend in your new town that also plays music. So I think not actually seeing what we have can stop people. And then, I did have a client who she was really active in her community, like showing up to the open these like jazz jam sessions. But, towards the end of our time together, it was she who said this. She was like, I realized so much of my work and this work is taking up kind of giving myself permission to take up the space and saying like I belong here. And
Mm.
so I went for her, that was the shift, was once she was like, I belong here, then she felt like she had this network and she felt free to say to those other musicians, like, hey, you want to play sometime? You want to record sometime?
Oh, no, that's good. I think you do kind of feel like you're tagging along. You're not like part of the group.
Yeah.
You're not in the in crowd or whatever when you first
Yeah.
start, right? And it's hard to like when do you get that? When do you get that feeling that you like have the right to ask someone
Yeah.
something?
That's really well put too. Like have the right. And um, I think that's where like coaching or like what the services you offer to with your coaching, it's like this we're mirrors for each other, and that's what I find ends up happening with sessions with people is that I'm like kind of just mirroring back something and they see it. You know,
Hmm.
with her, with that client, she was like, "Oh, yeah, I belong here. Like I'm doing all the same things as these other artists who, you know, and also as women, you know, we're sometimes a minority in the room. So,
Yep.
but she's like, I'm showing up and doing the same things. I'm getting on stage. I'm performing. I do belong here." And you know, coming to that aha moment on her own.
That brings up something that I hear artists say sometimes. It's like when they get to a certain point in their career, they say something like, I finally feel like a real artist. And I'm
Oh,
curious, like, what do you think actually is there such a thing as a quote real artist, or like what
wow.
makes us to make that shift in our own mind?
Gosh, I love that question. Um, what makes that shift in our mind? I know that for me, I remember having a conversation with a friend, and at that point, I had lots of evidence for myself that I was a musician, but he's just said something, and doesn't even sound that profound, but he was like, start calling yourself a musician. And I
Mm.
wasn't. Even though I was in like five bands and playing around town all the time, I didn't call myself a musician. And once I started doing that, it was uncomfortable at first, actually.
Mm.
And that did change something for me.
I think that's interesting because yeah, I do think especially if you because you had teaching maybe during the day or whatever, you're doing this on the side. And so people say, well, like I do music. Like I do music outside of
Yeah,
work or something like that, not like I am a musician. And I think it can be hard to know when you've reached some level where you can say I'm a musician, especially if you're self-taught, right? For me, I went to college for music. So
mm.
if I didn't call myself a musician, I think my college failed me. But there's plenty of people that didn't do that, right? And
Yeah,
and so when does that switch happen in their mind where they're like, I am a musician? Like if somebody called me and said, "Hey, can you come play keyboards for my band? We need a sub." I could say yes.
yeah. Well, don't you think we kind of need to shake the accolades to
Hmm.
to feel like culturally it's embedded in that like I'm a musician if I got my degree in it. I'm a musician if I get paid for it. And you actually don't need those things to be a
No,
musician,
no.
but no one else can really believe that but you. So I guess you kind of have to work on that belief and start feeling and again just kind of to come back to action, like are you doing the things a musician does, which is play
Mhm.
music and work on their skills as a musician, but
I do
like kind
think
of letting go.
the reps are important,
Yeah,
right? Because I just remember when I first got out of school and I had a degree in music and I had a degree in finance. And I would look at these job things and I'd be like, you need this many years of experience. And I'm like, how do you get experience if you just got out of school and you don't have experience? And then I realized, oh, it's either like you have a degree or you have experience.
yeah,
And so, once you get that experience out there that's outside of just yourself, you playing in your bedroom, right? You're playing with other
right.
musicians in some way, even if it
Hmm.
is open mics and stuff. You can get so much experience that way to feel confident to say, yeah, I could get into a group and play with other people and feel confident with my ability to do that. Or I could play solo in front of people It may be five people, but I can still do it,
Yeah.
without crashing and burning.
Yeah, I like the way you put that too, the reps, because I mean, if we were to use the sport analogy, it's like I'm not an athlete if I'm not doing the reps, and
Hmm.
the reps as a musician, they're there too. Got to
Yeah. Yeah. Do you
pump
think
those
that
muscles.
it's important for people to have, quote, industry contacts these days, or is there enough ability as independents that we can build a whole career without any of that?
Gosh. I think the way things are shifting, that we can build it without industry contacts. It's so much about, well, about community. So if we're tapping into our community and just like nurturing and growing our community, I think we can develop our own sustainable career without industry contacts.
I think so too. I mean, I built my career entirely outside of that.
It's beautiful.
And I was like a 32-year-old mom. Like no industry person was gonna go like, you're the next rock star. So, I needed to do that.
I want to see more mom rock stars, so
Me too. Me too. But I mean, I was rocking it in the way that I could rock it, right?
yeah,
I was rocking
totally.
it to a bunch of moms groups and they loved it. And
Yeah.
women's groups and things like that and people that really wanted to hear the messages that I had. And I think that there's so many now that can just do that in their own little sphere and you don't even have to be part of the music industry anymore, which I think is awesome.
Yeah, I think it's awesome too. It's I think a little or a lot more empowering.
Hmm.
You're not I'm not anti-label or anything, but I think you're not putting the power all into a label or a company.
Yep, and you're
It's
not waiting for permission. I mean,
Yeah,
I
that's right.
released my first stuff. I mean, if you remember, again, we were dating ourselves, but like mp3.com. That's where I
Mm,
released my first music.
mm-hmm.
And it was so empowering. I'm like, I can put this out on the internet by myself.
That
No
is
one
so
can stop
cool.
me?
I just love that. I love those stories. Yeah, that's cool.
Well, is there anything else you want to cover while we're here? I think we've covered a lot of ground, and I think that, both being coaches of musicians, I think we've covered a lot of the things that they struggle with, but is there anything that we missed?
I don't know if it's something we missed, but it's something that popped into my mind as we're having this discussion. And I'm just thinking about, that word confidence and just actually not waiting for confidence.
Mhm.
Like taking action so that you develop confidence. Whatever, so that you can have that, what did you call it? The awesomeness
The cycle of
wheel
awesomeness.
cycle of
Yes.
awesomeness. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you really have to. Like, you're not going to wake up one morning and go, I feel confident unless
Yeah,
you drink
right.
3 cups of coffee. And then it's probably going to wear off as soon as you get on stage, right? You have to do it. And I was thinking about like, so during COVID, I literally didn't sing for almost 2 years. I just had no reason to, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then a job fell into my lap to be a worship director at a church. And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't even know if my voice still works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I was experiencing that lack of confidence at that point. And yeah, like the first few weeks that I did it, man, it was shaky. I didn't know if I could rely on my voice all the time. My voice got tired. I remember being exhausted when I would get home after doing 2 services just because I wasn't used to doing that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But then you build up the confidence. But you can't, you, I could have said no to that job because I felt like I needed to go and practice and blah, blah, blah before I did it. So you have to have
Right.
the confidence
Totally.
to jump in there and do it and also know that you're gonna screw up and that you have to have just that inner strength of being like, I know that this is the road to being awesome. And by the time that I get my confidence and I'm all there, people won't remember those first few weeks when I was
Right.
shaky.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I love that knowing that's the road still, the road towards
Yep.
my awesome
It's
self.
the why. And for me, that
Yeah.
was the why was I needed to get in front of people again. Like I had been
Mm.
isolated for too long. And yeah, my voice was rusty, but I knew that that was a desire of mine to get back in front of people and sing again.
Mm,
And so that was worth it. Like, I was worth going through the screw ups.
yeah. How long did it take?
It really, I'd say it took 3 or 4 weeks. Of course, it was I came on maybe 5 or 6 weeks before Easter. So it was a little stressful because, Easter's a big deal in the
Prime
church.
time.
And
Yeah.
there was just a lot more going on than normal. So I was like, I don't know if I can handle this, but I did it anyway. And I'm glad
Yeah.
that I did because now it's like, it's super easy.
Yeah. Yeah. When I started playing solo, I toured all over the world with La Luz and but playing solo felt terrifying.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was
You just
so
feel
scary.
so exposed.
Yeah. And now it's like you said, I just had to kind of just keep doing it, put in the reps, and it doesn't feel as scary anymore. It's a breeze. It's
For sure.
expressive in its own way.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. Well, okay, so let everybody know how they can connect with you online if anyone wants to talk to you about coaching, if they want to connect with you. I don't know if you're on social media.
Yes, I'm on both. So if, any of your listeners are feeling like I am that person, I've got all these voice memos that aren't finished and they're feeling like I've got more to say. I want to finish my recording, put out my record. They can connect with me online on my website, which is www.alicesandal.com. And I think we'll put it in the show notes, right?
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, and you can actually sign up for free coaching with me so we can have a little mini coaching session and get the conversation going if they're feeling ready to like
Cool.
take those steps. Yeah. And if they're not quite ready for that, I do also have a free resource for musicians at all levels, and it's designed to kind of develop those skills that we talked about and also develop your musical vocabulary. So that's called Song Analysis 101. It's a free resource and we can connect that way. That's
Nice.
also on my website.
Nice. And then what's your social media of choice?
Social media, I'm on Instagram, and the
Perfect.
handle is Alice in the River.
Alice in the River. Interesting.
Yeah,
I like it.
yeah. Thank you so much, Bree. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. Like you said, we do have a lot of overlapping circles as far as our thoughts and beliefs and experiences in music. So I'm so glad we were able to have this conversation.
Me too. Me too.